Welcome to this daily PBJ devotional. Read Numbers 22, Isaiah 11 and 12, and Psalm 127 for today's Old Testament readings. This devotional is about Numbers 22. Then the Israelites traveled on and camped in the plains of Moab, near the Jordan, across from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was terrified of the people because they were numerous. Indeed, Moab dreaded the Israelites. So the Moabites said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will devour everything around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." Since Balak, son of Zippor, was king of Moab at the time, he sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor, which is by the Euphrates in the land of the people. "Behold, a people has come out of Egypt," said Balak. "They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. So please come now and put a curse on this people, because they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land, for I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed." The elders of Moab and Midian departed with the fees for divination in hand. They came to Balaam and relayed to him the words of Balak. "Spend the night here," Balaam replied, "and I will give you the answer that the Lord speaks to me." So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and asked, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. Behold, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the face of the land. Now come and put a curse on them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them away." But God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You are not to curse this people, for they are blessed." So Balaam got up the next morning and said to Balak's princes, "Go back to your homeland, because the Lord has refused to let me go with you." And the princes of Moab arose, returned to Balak, and said, "Balaam refused to come with us." Then Balak sent other princes, more numerous and more distinguished than the first messengers. They came to Balaam and said, "This is what Balak, son of Zippor, says. Please let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will honor you richly and do whatever you say. So please come and put a curse on this people for me." But Balaam replied to the servants of Balak, "If Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything small or great to go beyond the command of the Lord my God. So now, please stay here overnight, as the others did, that I may find out what else the Lord has to tell me." That night God came to Balaam and said, "Since these men have come to summon you, get up and go with them. But you must only do what I tell you." So in the morning Balaam got up, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. Then God's anger was kindled, because Moab was going along, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the path and went into a field. So Balaam beat her to return her to the path. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow passage between 2 vineyards, with walls on either side. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, and pressed herself against the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it. So he beat her once again. And the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place, where there was no room to turn to the right or left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, and he became furious and beat her with his staff. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you, that you have beaten me these 3 times?" Balaam answered the donkey, "You have made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." But the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not the donkey you have ridden all your life until today? Have I ever treated you this way before?" "No," he replied. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. And Balaam bowed low and fell face down. The angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away, then by now I would surely have killed you." and let her live." "I have sinned," Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "for I did not realize that you were standing in the road to confront me. And now, if this is displeasing in your sight, I will go back home." But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you are to speak only what I tell you." So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moabite city on the Arnon border, at the edge of his territory. And he said to Balaam, "Did I not send you an urgent summons? Why did you not come to me? Am I really not able to richly reward you?" "See, I have come to you," Balaam replied. "But can I say just anything? I must speak only the word that God puts in my mouth." So Balaam accompanied Balak, and they came to Kiriath Huzoth. Balak sacrificed cattle and sheep, and he gave portions to Balaam and the princes who were with him. The next morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him up to Bamoth Baal. From there he could see the outskirts of the camp of the people. This is God's word. Israel was tantalizingly close to the promised land in our passage for today. The 40 years of wandering was almost over, and verse 1 says, the Israelites camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. That's from the NIV. You know already that Jericho was the first city they defeated when they entered into the land. So the events of this chapter, and the ones that followed this chapter, happened just before they received the land that God had promised them. Finally, God had blessed his people, enabling them to defeat the Amorites, according to verse 2, and to become a large nation, according to verse 3. Verse 3 calls them so many people in the NIV. Out of fear, the Moabites looked for a way to defeat Israel. But given that God was with them, what kind of defeat could they imagine or engineer? A military defeat was out of the question. So they decided to try to win a spiritual war and found Balaam, according to verse 5. They asked him to curse Israel, according to verse 6, and Balaam asked them to wait overnight while he sought revelation from God. In verse 8, Balaam said, "I will report back to you with the answer that the Lord gives me." The word Lord is Yahweh, the covenant name of God for Israel. But why was Balaam using this name for God? One reason is possibly that he himself was a worshiper of Yahweh. Another answer is that he knew many gods and that Yahweh was Israel's God, so he waited for revelation from that God. It is hard to know from these chapters, but I think that the answer is in the latter. Balaam didn't worship Yahweh, but he knew who Yahweh was, and he sought revelation from Israel's God for that reason. God did, in fact, speak with Balaam and ordered him not to curse his people, according to verse 12. Balak sent a second delegation and asked Balaam to reconsider, according to verse 15. This time God gave permission for Balak to go with them on the condition that he only speak God's word, according to verse 20. What happened next is strange. God had allowed Balaam to go, according to verse 20, but in verse 22, we learn God was very angry when he went. Although Moses did not explain further in Numbers, God's anger at Balaam may have been anger at his eagerness to find a way to get paid for his prophecies against God's people. In verse 22b, Balaam encountered the angel of the Lord, which refers to Jesus before he became a man. After the very unusual interaction with his donkey that we saw in verses 23 through 34, Christ spoke to Balaam himself directly and charged him again to speak only what I tell you. Those are the words of the NIV from verse 35. Now there's more to this story that we'll come to in days ahead in our readings. But here in this chapter, we see God's divine protection of his people. He would not allow his people to be cursed by an unscrupulous prophet. Have you ever considered that maybe God's enemies want to bring a curse into your life that only God knows about and that only he can prevent? That may happen. That kind of thing may happen more than we imagine. But unless our sovereign God allows the curse into your life, God's enemies are powerless to touch you. Ask God then for protection from his enemies, and thank God for his provision and peace that he gives us. If you found this devotional helpful, please to sign up to receive it every day, go to dailypbj.com/subscribe, and you can subscribe for free by email. Please also consider supporting me financially. Go to dailypbj.com/support. Finally, please share this with someone who will be encouraged in their faith by it, and I'll see you next time. May God bless you. Hope you have a great day today.